Good day, everyone. My name is Ali Al-Khatib, and I'll be presenting this paper today. I'm afraid the authors couldn't be with us, but I promise you they're all well done. I mean, they're well. Now, with the rise of algorithmic systems, there have been a lot of concerns about how we ensure deployments are ethical. One ethical framing various Chi papers have deployed, is fairness, accountability, and transparency. Under this, an algorithm is ethical if it does not discriminate, is answerable to its users, and is transparent about how it works. How exactly one achieves an algorithm that ticks all of those boxes is less studied. While HCI researchers have tested ideas for any of those three pillars of ethics, they are rarely tested in practical industry contexts, and rarely tested together. We received an opportunity to work with a corporation attempting to build a fair, transparent, and accountable algorithm for their use case, and we took it up. We're reporting it out here as a template for how you can go about implementing these principles in your own work. The use case itself is very simple and starts with a question. How do we tackle the reduction of arable farmland and the drastic aging of the human population? The answer is, we turn old people into food. A machine learning system trained on social media data identifies people with low levels of social connectivity, people who won't be missed, coupled with an age estimation through facial recognition. Autonomous drones then intercept the targeted individual, carrying them to a processing plant where they can be rendered down into substitute foodstuffs. Obviously, given the consequences of a misbehaving algorithm, ethics is pretty important here. We'll start with fairness, which is a very hotly contested concept. But here we use it to refer to a system that does not discriminate according to demographics, that is not racially biased or gender biased. To identify whether this appeared in any of LNI's model, we subjected it to an algorithmic audit, testing a sample of demographically tagged photographs and data sets against the model as it stood. As you can see, we found a dramatic set of both racial and gender biases. Cis white men in particular were disproportionately likely to be ground down into nutritious slurry. Now, LNI's engineers were incredibly concerned about this, which makes sense given that the average engineering department's demographics reflect that pretty strongly. And so they sought to rewrite the model. An algorithmic audit of the updated model showed that the racial and gender bias had largely dissipated, leaving everyone with a roughly equal chance of being minced and demonstrating precisely how powerful corporate engagement can be for producing fair and humane outcomes. Now, accountability is the second pillar. Are an algorithm's users able to reasonably contest its decisions? For this, we conducted a round of user testing to investigate stakeholder needs and concerns, which you should read the full paper about to hear more about. This resulted in a range of accountability mechanisms. Two mechanisms in particular are worth noting. The first allows someone who has been identified for mulching to contest the decision. The drone notifies them of their status and affords them a 10-second window in which to be connected to one of our customer service representatives to talk through why they were chosen and dispute it. The second, of relevance only if this opportunity is not taken or is not successful, is more for the benefit of the deceased's family and allows them the opportunity to contest the decision post-mulching. If successful, an equally adorable and socially useful grandparent will be provided at a very discounted rate. And finally, we have transparency. Is the algorithm clear about about how a decision has been made? This is heavily interwoven with accountability. And so the first solution we came up with was to provide, in both appeal processes, a printout of the factors that had led to the algorithm making the decision that it had. LNI executives were particularly enthusiastic about how this served to raise awareness of their products. The second is more of a general consent mechanism. Rather than allow drones to obtain their targets anywhere, we restricted them to public spaces, marked with a convenient and clearly readable notice. LNI executives were extremely enthusiastic about our solutions, and we hope you all are too. Our conclusion is that fairness, accountability, and transparency, if properly implemented, has the potential to dramatically change the outcomes of our more data-fueled world. Through demonstrating that this idealized form of fairness, accountability, and transparency, in which we completely fail to challenge any kind of structural power, treat ethics as a universal checklist, and absolve ourselves of basic empathy in pursuit of scientific goals and Vichy-style collaborationism, we believe we can provide a fantastic template for precisely the kind of future that so much of HCI seems to want. Thank you. I guess I'm open to questions.
That must have been the quickest talk ever.
Yeah.
So we have tons of time for these questions. I'm just saying, in case you sit like away from the microphone, which is over here, there's also Michael, an incredibly helpful student volunteer who's giving you papers, and then I will read out the questions.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
You just keep on talking.
Yeah, I can keep going.
Please use a microphone.
Hi, I really liked your talk. I really appreciate the kind of perspective it came from. My question maybe isn't as humorous, maybe a little bit more from the dull, sincere perspective, but I think this is raising some really interesting points, and I just kind of want to ask that straightforward question. So are fairness, accountability, and transparency fundamentally flawed, like we need to rework them, or are they just really easy to do badly?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Oz, but my opinion on this is that there are severe problems with sort of uncritical following of fairness, accountability, and transparency as the guideposts by which we make all of our decisions about algorithmic systems. And this is a very clear illustration that if you follow it without even like looking at where it's leading you, you will find yourself in this place where you're making decisions that are hurting marginalized communities just because it's, for instance, the will of the majority that made a decision about it. So to some extent, yes, I think that there is this fundamental flaw with these values.
Sorry, everybody.
So I apologize in advance, I don't do HCI at all. But my question is, it seems to me that what you're raising is the fact that you need to have a goal that is morally acceptable. So how does HCI in general think about goals?
Wow, that's a really good question. Can I ask for a follow-up, sort of an answer to my follow-up question? Can you contextualize goals? Because one thought that I have is like the algorithms that Facebook uses are fairly accountable to the engineers and the managers at Facebook, and so they have a goal, and they're quite happy with how things are going for the most part.
I don't know. I'm actually a vision scientist. I study human optics, so nothing to do with Facebook.
Interesting.
And so my question is in general, how does the HCI world think about how they implement systems and processes to help people and organizations, entities, agents achieve their goals? And how do they think about goals in that context?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think,
and it's really like a naive question. I'm not trying to raise any sort of difficult point. I apologize.
You're raising a difficult point because it's a validly difficult question. I think maybe this is controversial. I think that Chi is a very large field, and there are people that have different opinions about how they go, what the goal of HCI is to some extent. My opinion is that the goal of HCI is to reflect and try to meet the desires of the people that use systems and work and live within ecosystems. But that's potentially different from like a corporate goal or a corporate interest.
So I guess my question was, let's say that there is a goal and you're trying to implement a solution that goes through a goal, and you're going to use those principles, right? How do you incorporate the goal that you're trying to achieve into the way you think about that process? So it's not really the goal of HCI, it's the goal of whatever agent you're trying to build a process for, I guess.
If I understand you correctly, I think that essentially my answer is that you need to talk with and work with the people that you're trying to, if the people at the core of that goal. And that means participatory design and working with people and listening to people and reflecting on what they tell you. And yeah, I hope that that to some extent answers your question. I would love to chat more if you have more thoughts on that. Yeah.
I don't have thoughts.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for this very interesting, you trigger a lot of interesting things. And I wondered, do you think it would help if you would see these concepts, fairness, accountability, and transparency, as social constructs that are only defined in a social context?
Yes, absolutely. And they're also contextually defined. Things like transparency are very situational. And like if I ask, I'm sort of plugging a talk that I gave yesterday. If I asked a police officer like how many people he's pulled over that day, he might give me an answer. If I filed a Freedom of Information request and asked how many people had been pulled over on that street that day by that police officer, I might get a different kind of answer. But these are all sort of valid processes or valid sort of routes towards getting information. Mm-hmm. And so it's contextual depending on the situation and the way that I ask for that information. But I do think that you're absolutely right, that like our notions of fairness are culturally situated in our notions of ethics and philosophy, and we don't talk about that much. Especially like in the ML community, they're sort of like driving at like fairness without really talking about what that exactly is. And some researchers have pointed out that like depending on your definition of fairness, I mean, you might have a bunch of cis white men get mulched up, but that's because we're not really talking about what exactly fairness is, or what our definition of fairness is.
But then what would be the way forward, you think?
We need to have more concrete, more explicit conversations about what these things mean. And I think that this is driving at that pretty aggressively.
Thanks.
I love the talk and paper. Sent it to my dad, told him I wasn't getting any ideas.
Okay.
No, I was wondering, could you expand a little bit more on your thoughts about, could you expand a little bit more on your thoughts about accountability specifically? Because you guys did provide, in fact, a way that was technically accountable, but in that sense, it's very much the way that you do it. And so how would you think about the right way to contextualize accountability?
I mean, unfortunately, the short answer to that is that it depends on the context. And depending on the application of the system and the way that it's designed, there are essentially like different ways that you need to go about accountability that can't be sort of answered in a blanket fashion, which is, again, a frustrating thing for machine learning experts and people that sort of apply AI and all that other stuff in this way. But that's just the reality. Like anything involving people is going to be difficult.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Obviously, the piece is amazing, but I feel like what this piece actually highlights is not so much the problems in fairness, accountability, and transparency, which obviously there are many, but actually the fact that this is actually a layer on top of something that is already troublesome, which is what are we doing, and the kinds of questions we're trying to answer, and the kinds of programs that we're making are often unethical from the beginning, and FAT won't fix it. So I feel like focusing on that this piece actually like shows you how focusing on FAT is useless, because we haven't even started talking about the underlying foundation of the work. So I really appreciated the way that this sort of absurd example highlights that. But the thing is that there are so many like real world examples that are doing this, and I hope that this parody encourages others to notice that we are mulching old people.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for refocusing that. Yeah, this paper is trying to call out that these are goals that we've just taken for granted as like the right thing that we should be doing, and they're like even, I guess, how do I say this generously? It is impossible for us to achieve a pro-social, sort of socially acceptable outcome given what we want out of society if we're just chasing after fairness, accountability, and transparency. Again, without even thinking about what those things mean, but then not even going beyond any of those three tenets. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out more clearly. Thank you all so much.